Oh, good. So the meeting has started. All right. So we're at the top of the hour. We'll just wait till 1:01 our time. People meeting, waiting in the lobby. Welcome. As people are signing in, we're just going to wait for 1 minute. Everybody gets settled. You should be seeing the title screen for now. All right, why don't we get started? So welcome everyone to our April webinar. We're going to be talking today with Shawn Morrison, whom I'll introduce in a moment. We're going to be talking about big rooms and setting yourselves up for project success. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce the head of our marketing area, Kelly Choi. Just wants to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to let you guys know or put a face to a name anyways, because you'll be getting some emails from me. Just a quick note, I am planning our May and June's webinars. So if you want to kind of make a quick note on your calendars, May 15th, we'll be joined with by Paul Bingham from Smart Connected Buildings across the pond. And then in June, we are joined by Eric Lucis on June 20th from ACON, who will be talking about pole planning.
Right on. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, you were going to mention about the recording
Oh,
as
yes,
well.
everyone should receive a recording following this event. If you don't, by all means, just respond to the invite and I will know that I need to make sure you guys get a copy of it. It will be posted also on YouTube very shortly.
Right on. Perfect. So I'd like to introduce Shawn Morrison, our guest today. Oh, firstly, my name's Alan Boyque. I'm one of the founders of Nyali, and I do my best to try and host these webinars. I'm by no means a professional. On that note, I'd like to introduce Shawn Morrison, our guest today. So, Shawn, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, your background, how you got into the industry, what you're doing now, etc.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Shawn Morrison. Been in the industry 28 years, almost 29 years, I guess. I was with my prior employer for 28 of those years. I've recently changed jobs and moved east, Colorado native. Believe it or not, I'm by schooling, I'm a teacher. So I got into construction because I needed a summer job in Gunnison, Colorado. And I spent the first, 5 years of my career in the field, doing concrete, doing anything carpenter related. And then worked my way up to a senior superintendent with Hazelland Construction. So most of my work would be in small communities, but big buildings, like Aspen Valley Hospital was one. I did hospital Meeker. I worked in Vail, Snowmass, Steamboat. Did a lot of work in Denver as well, but usually a remote area where we, didn't have the strongest subcontractor trade group from a technology standpoint, and then trying to convince them to do lean and pull planning and follow direction and get stuff built quickly.
Right on. Clearly, you've been on both sides of the desk.
Yes.
And you're a teacher, so we are going to learn something.
Yeah.
So let's go to our discussion topics, and this is a general outline of what we're going to be talking about. We'll get definition of a big room. Most people have probably heard about it, but we'll launch into that, just describing that, and then I think the big thing is getting your teams prepared for big rooms themselves and planning sessions. Very important, and the tools you need, and maybe some practical advice on setting up big rooms. So just to start the discussion, Sean, I'm going to flip up an image so people have, in case they're not familiar with big rooms, just have an image of what a big room is, and you might recognize one of these pictures. So
I
if you just
do
want
recognize one of
to,
those.
you just want to talk through these and just say, what is a big room? Obviously, it's big.
Was that a question to me?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a big room should be a place that people come to collaborate. They feel comfortable and are encouraged to speak their mind, share their thought processes, and really just work together as a team on figuring out the best way to get anything done. And it doesn't matter how major or how small, but it's a place where you can come and really work together on planning out the right kind of scope and sequence and how to get the work done.
Yeah, right on. Now, tell us, are there different types of big rooms? Is it, I see three, obviously analog,
Oh,
digital, then totally immersive, all walls. Like, could you just talk through us different types of big rooms so that people don't just get, it's just this one thing?
yeah. I mean, I've been in all of them. I mean, my original big room was a single wide trailer, like that top left picture. Now imagine trying to do a pull plan of a major section of work, and you've got 25 guys in a single wide trailer, and you're trying to do that kind of pull plan. It got really uncomfortable, kind of chaotic. What I've learned is, in that kind of environment, you become a facilitator and you actually place all the tags. You just put them where they tell you. Um, you know, um, I hope to never have to do another sticky note paper one in my life ever again, to be quite honest with you. Um, the other room, the one of the top right one, that was my project in Wheat Ridge. It was a nice size hospital. That was a good sized room. We built it as a horseshoe. So we had 6 or 7 tables, but it was always a horseshoe, and it was always pointed towards the screens on the head of the wall. But we also had 2 TVs off to the side, which made it great for like Teams calls. We did most everything in Teams call, kind of like today. But the outside walls, which you don't have a great picture of, are all our things that we wanted to constantly keep looking at. So depending on the phase of work, where we're at, say if we were doing foundations, we'd have a ton of laminated drawings up on the walls that people could go draw circles on or look at or mark up during the meetings before we actually put them up on the boards or in the pool plan and whatnot. So pretty curious about the one below, because it kind of takes that ability to keep those constant photos up, but looks like it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like you're suggesting that there will always be need for physical artifacts, that, the digital adoption of digital doesn't
Mm-hmm.
solve anything. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, because as you work through your drawings, right, that's what we build off of, and having the ability to put your drawings up on the current work status you've got going on. Builders they're very visual, and they need to touch, and they need to draw, and they need to mark stuff up. So having those drawings always around, so as we're planning a scope of work, we have the right drawings up on the wall. It just gives them the ability to have that sometimes paper fill, which makes them feel comfortable.
Right.
Especially with the older guys, you tell them, oh, by the way, you're going to do a touch screen, and we're going to have you standing in front of a room, and we're going to be putting all your input up there on the board. They're going to panic. Not everyone likes using the computers or the iPads. There's still a A lot of guys out there and gals that still like the paper prints and everything else. And you know, you got to take baby steps with them. You just can't take it all away from them at once. You might freak them out.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. And do you see that comfort, like we'll sort of move into the people side, like that comfort level, is that part of the big room experience? Like it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it's an emphasis for you.
Oh, it is. Well, when you're creating a big room, right? What you're creating is a team environment where
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to get everyone to come in and understand that they're not working for contractor XYZ. The goal is that they become part of the project team, right? And
Right.
so to use the last project, it was SEL. And so everything we talked about was being part of the SEL team, right? And I hardly ever said, "Oh, I'm a Hazelden employee." You know, when I talked to the group, I was part of the SEL project team, because as you're trying to get that mindset set around, hey, we're going to win and lose as a team. And so if one person loses, the whole team loses. So we're going to create this environment where we're always working together and we're always trying to help each other out. And we're always trying to do what's right for the project team versus the individual.
Right. Right. That sounds really important. Actually, I forgot to mention one thing, participants. Your job today is to actually take away one thing you're going to either do tomorrow or tell your peers about. So, um, the questions I ask Shawn are about things that we're probably all thinking, and you'll have a chance to ask questions at the end through the chat. So I apologize for missing that. So on that people side and making people comfortable, what do you actually do? Like, are there any exercises or talks? Like you get everybody together and
Oh,
then what?
absolutely.
Like, you know,
Absolutely.
what are some of your favorite techniques or most effective?
My favorite one is when I first bring a team together, I bring new individuals in, is we go around the room introducing ourselves, right? And
Mm,
of course, we talk about who we are, years of experience, you know, what company we work for, what scopes we're on. But then I always ask for them to dive a little deep on something personal, right?
mm,
And then each team member does that and goes around the room. And then what we talk about is, you know, and to give you a little history on myself, I started doing, my company came to me in 2011 and said, "Hey, we want you to learn everything there is about lean, and then you're going to do it on your projects." And then I ended up being the guy that trained every single person in my company on how to do pool planning and everything else.
mm.
So I've spent a lot of years working on this. But this one seems to be the most effective, because when you start talking to them about this team environment and you're getting their years of experience, right? So you're building little pieces of trust, right? And you hear some guy or some gal's got, you know, 20 years of experience, you know, we're going to perk up and we're going to listen a little bit more, because the reality is we're trying to take the schedule writing process away from, you know, a big, bald, type A personality superintendent and really push it to the right people, the ones that really know how to do the work, right? I mean, I know I know little about a lot of things, but I don't, you know, I'm not an expert in any one. That's why we bring our groups together and we get them there. But as we go around the room, you know, you start to build that human element to it, and getting everyone to hear all these stories. And then you start to relate to these people. And then what the real reality is as people, we're more likely to help someone when they have a hard time if we know something personal about them versus if we didn't know anything about them at all. You know, and if I just knew you were Alan and you worked for Nally and I was Shawn and I worked for Gilbane, right? And you were having a hard day and that's all I cared about was your name, you know, I might ignore the fact that you might need some help, right? And so as a team, again, the thought is every day someone is not going to succeed the way they probably should have. And so we can either beat them up or we can lift them up and figure out how to make it all work and keep the job rolling.
Wow, that's really quite profound. I appreciate your detail on that. And the respect for people definitely being a tenet of Last Planner
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes is forgotten. In your training of people, have you had to take them aside from a leadership perspective, like a superintendent, and say, "Hey, you know, Bob, like things aren't quite working for you, and here's why. Like, what
Mhm.
type of advice, like, what's your sort of toughest case in that regard?
You know, gosh, there's a tough case on every project, right? You're gonna run into those old school individuals that they just don't believe in what we do, and they think. I think the bigger one, the challenge I always run to is with superintendents, especially, is they always feel like they're going to lose control of their project by
Mm,
giving control to the team. And I faced that on my last project with a couple individuals that were running certain parts, and you know, it was about a weekly occurrence that we'd have to sit down with this individual and be like, listen, this whole team is here to help you and to help, you know, to give you the right information, and you know, if you would just understand that. Here's how I look at it, and what I realized, right? By giving control back to the team, I actually had more control over the entire project because of the amount of buy-in I got on any activity we're doing. Everyone agreed to it, and we all said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do." And so there was no yelling or screaming matches. It was truly just at times fact, like, "Hey, you didn't accomplish what you're supposed to. Give us your reasons why. We want to dive down to exactly what was going on and why we didn't get there, and we're going to fix it. But in the meantime, we're going to do these 3 or 4 steps to get back on track." So,
yeah.
um,
So, there are some that might say, "Oh man, you reach that point where everybody's contributing." Like, how long does that take for everybody to finally say, "Yeah, I'm here to deliver value. I'm here
yeah.
and I'm respected." Like, how long does that take, Sean, for that team to form, or a big room environment to flourish, we'll call it?
I think it depends on where it starts at, right? Our last project was great because it started at the very top with the owner and then the owner group, right? And they were really the driving force down to the whole IPD light process and working
Okay.
together as a team. So they built this environment. And so as we did all our subcontractor interviews, the owners and the owners reps were in there, and we talked about it from day one. So by the time people got on site, they knew that was the expectation.
Ah,
And so for that project by itself, it happened really quick. It was really organic, and people knew that they were bringing value and that we cherish it. And that's one of the things about it is when those people do fail, we don't abuse them in front of everyone. We don't make them look horrible, right? We show them how we're trying to work with them and how to make things keep going. We don't beat them up. We just state the obvious. Yep, we didn't get where we were supposed to, and here's the impact, and here's the 4 or 5 things we're going to do to fix it, right? And they see us working with them to keep everything rolling, and not be that accusatory and like, oh, we're going to back charge the crap out of you, and we're going to line all these people up, and they're going to charge. We never talked about back charges in those meetings. It was more
right.
about how do we keep the overall work going, and how do we keep
Yeah,
working together.
yeah, it's really interesting. It's not contractual, but it's certainly understood that this is how you're
Mm-hmm.
going to behave, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's fascinating. How
Yeah.
how do you, how do we promote more of that in industry?
Yeah. Good question. It's if I had that solved, I'd probably be a millionaire. Uh,
It is an unfair
when,
question.
when we all be there, but again, you got to have the right mindset for it and understand it. Sometimes people have these controls they put in place that are so stringent that they can't see through
Mm,
the processes that understand that they're actually causing more problems than it's worth.
right.
Um, but we just keep chugging along. I mean, I've had other projects where the owner didn't really care about lean, or the last planner just knew that we did it, right? And then it's from our side, it's top down, and it's that 100% commitment from a team level at that point that we were going to live and die by our planning processes and working together and seeing this job all the way through. I think
Right.
one key is right is don't think, oh, I have this big room, so I'm just going to start having all these pull plans. There's a bunch of work on the front end of that, right? Before any full plan, I probably have 2 or 3 prep meetings with that group to set the right tone, the right expectation, what we're looking at, all the questions we want to ask, right? And I always start with like a site logistics map and show them, hey, when we were originally putting this job together, this is how we thought we were going to flow. But let's talk about it. Is this the right way we need to flow? Do we need to go from top left down to bottom right, or do we need to go the other direction and really get their buy-in from that standpoint? And there's been times where I've changed my site logistics map because I missed 1 or 2 key items, and the subcontractor pointed them out. You know what? Hey, I'm human. I showed a little bit of vulnerability. We changed our whole plan, not our whole plan, but our whole access plan. And what they're finding is they do have a say, and what they say does matter, and we really listen to what they have to say. That makes sense.
You're getting at the ownership. They need to own the project with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. So you're sort of getting at the aspect of, I think, that would be important for people that haven't set up a big room. What you're now talking about the steps, what you do. Like before there's even any notion of a room, what do you have to do to get this big room happen? There's nothing. So where do you start? Like how do you pitch the idea that I need a double trailer or I need an office, or take me to the steps to, and then you started talking about how you get your subs involved.
Absolutely. And you look at your size of project and understand how many people you're going to, what's the average size of the meeting you're going to have and how many people you're going to have in the room. And you got to size it accordingly. You don't want it to be so jam-packed where they can't really function, because the reality is we want them moving around freely and going over to different groups and talking to them and having the conversations. Right. So you've got to create a space that's inviting to that. Right. And so you got to go a little bigger than what you think you need. Right. Because if you want to just keep it really small and tight and intimate, it might stifle some of the conversations. Right. And so you want to have a room big enough to where a group might go to the northeast corner and one might go to the northwest corner, and they're having 2 separate conversations, but they're important conversations that need to be happening at the same time before they walk up to the actual board and start placing tags. And if you're too tight and too intimate where you can't have those multiple conversations, it might take the planning a little bit longer, or something might not be said. Sometimes people don't like talking in front of the group and they feel more comfortable off to the side with just a couple people, and then they'll start sharing their ideas.
Right. So how are you accommodating remote folks, like especially in pre-construction where you're not even at the site yet?
Yeah.
What are the types of things that you've tried in that the tyranny of distance, I call it?
Yeah. Well, at first it was really brutal, especially pre-COVID, right? Everything, we always wanted everything in person. We were still, archaic in the way we still stuck sticky notes up on the board, and then we're trying to call these people in and we're trying to handwrite their sticky notes in there and everything else. So the digital platform really helped ease that pain, right? And especially with one that, we can have the drawings up, or they have a set of drawings. They can see the actual board we're working in. So that's helped out a lot. And Teams use the right platform. Some people like Zoom. I found that Teams is probably the best platform and the easiest platform to use, because the ability to share the screen so fast, right? You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to do a bunch of stuff. If someone needs the screen, they can take it. The sound usually works right. So setting up the right technology, it's the space, right? Having enough white wall space to put up all your drawings you want, but then you need to have your technology piece in there, right? I really liked my 3 boards up front. I liked my 2 TVs to the side, and they were big enough TVs where we could see, and we'd put drawings up on the TVs. We'd have our planning board in the middle, right? So we could flip through the drawings quicker, or we'd have our drawings on the walls. So.
Right. Before we get to questions and folks, you can certainly start sending them in. What if you could look forward, what do you see as the future of big rooms? What, in terms of new technologies and things that maybe are missing now, like what would you think about the future?
Oh gosh. Um, you know, good question, because I didn't think I'd ever get to where I had touchscreens in a big room, or the amount of TVs we had, right? We had whiteboards. I mean, we were thrilled when we got brand new whiteboards, and we didn't buy just a piece of metal from Home Depot and then hope to God it works all right. The right kind of microphone system, the right kind of speaker system, the right kind of camera system in there is really important, especially for the folks that can't make it. You're doing a big project. You got people from all over the country trying to call in, right? You want something that's really going to work well for them. So setting up your room with the right kind of microphone so they do hear the soft talkers and you're not constantly asking someone to speak up or whatnot. Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
yeah, it's tough to foresee. It's pretty tough to foresee the future. That's for sure. So I have one more question, and I've heard the noise from the last planners. How do you talk to them about the investment in planning, the investment in time, the investment in the big room of their time? How do you talk to them about that, to say, I know, like, your character isn't to say show up or that's it. Like, how do you talk about that?
Well, when we started at the beginning, right? Again, if it starts at the top, it's in all their contracts. So when we're in pre-con meetings with them, or we're buying them out, we're like, oh, by the way, remember, you are a part of all these planning sessions, right? And all these planning meetings, and you are going to follow how we operate here. And so it's usually in the boilerplate of their contract, or at least that's how we did it at Hazelwood. And that way, it wasn't to like, here's your contract, and I'm going to, it's just like, hey, it's in your contract. So what I never heard at SCL, especially with the amount of meetings we had there with the planning, that was an enormous job. And gosh, I had 5 or 6 different planning sessions a week for the different areas. And some guys were in multiple meetings. I never once heard of, hey, we have too many meetings. Because once you get rolling, you get that cadence, you get people buying in, and they see the value of the meeting and what you're truly trying to do. They quit worrying. They quit looking at it like, oh, I'm just going to another stupid meeting. It's like, oh, this meeting actually has value, and we're going to get something out of it. And what we really get out of it is direction, and we can really march our troops in the right way. And so, if you get a truly lean team and they understand that, you don't hear much about the amount of meetings that it takes to plan out the project.
Yeah, it probably has a lot to do with the way you introduce them and get them engaged. And it's not a planning meeting anymore. It's like, this is the way we're going to be successful.
Yeah,
by getting together and work things out.
Absolutely.
So I'm still waiting for some questions. There's got to be some people that are wondering about something. This is your one chance to get Shawn Morrison to give you an answer. Here we go. Sorry, Shawn, I'll just get my glasses.
Oh, no, that's fine.
We have a comment from Rick. The process is designed for continuous improvement. Were the trades also able to improve themselves in their process?
Yes, absolutely. Many comments on that, and they really appreciated it because, what they learned about themselves in the process is they learned how to be better planners. And that's what we talked about, right? We're not planning to be okay planners. And our mantra on STL was to be the best hospital planners in the country. And every plan we put together is going to be the best so we can be successful. And so you get that mindset rolling early with these guys that, they're building something truly amazing, and we're doing it at next breaking speed. And so our planning's got to be perfect. And so we're going to continually work on how to do the planning process and everything else. And then, we brought guys in like Rich and Larry, right? And they help with that. So when someone's struggling with what should I be looking at and what should we talk about? But again, you start at 2 to 3 weeks beforehand before you get to the full plan. here's what we're working on, here's where we're going, this is what we need to be thinking about. And then we do our pull plan. And then from there, once we agree with our pull plan, right, we're dumping it into our 6-week look ahead schedule. And then each week we're bringing in that 6th week. We're constantly always looking 6 weeks out. And I think one of the continuous improvement processes that we put in place that helps us out there was when we look for all our constraints 6 to 8 to 10 weeks out and get them documented someplace with an action plan of how do we solve all these possible constraints in the future. So by the time we get to the work, they're taken care of and we can be truly successful.
Right on. 3 questions in the queue now. One from Max. Do you see any value in using QR codes in the big room and out in the field that can be scanned and directed to locations within Niali? So you must be familiar with the product. Like, that's to get direct access to items relating to that location. It sounds like photos associated with activities or something like that. Do you see any value or?
Oh, absolutely. And the other one I think about is if you guys use Procore, right? Procore has a great location place. You can use QR codes, right? The more you can just walk to a room and scan a code and see everything, the entire history of a room by just clicking a QR code, it's huge. Right. And then you can also take that back, right? Especially if you have the ability, like you're walking, you see something in the room, you're like, oh, we need to talk about this in planning. You shoot that QR code, maybe you can add a note in there. And then when you sit down to planning, you're like, oh, I had a note and it's already kind of populated there. You got something to talk about.
All right, perfect. Somebody's picked up on your preparatory meetings and they're wondering, can you go into more detail with what kind of preparation meetings are valuable ahead of a pull planning session?
Absolutely. And so really it's getting familiar with the scope of work, right? I'm not a pull planner, sit down and say, oh, I'm going to pull plan this entire project, because that's just asinine. So I tried to break it down into 8 to 10 or 15 people, right? When someone's coming to the pull plan, they're not just going to talk about 1 or 2 items, but they have a lot of work in there. But we sit down, we drive through or jump through the drawings, make sure they understand the exact area. So we draw out the area on the map. So we'd have that map up on the wall. Here's the area. This is what we need to be working at. And then, I up on the planning board, I'd put the start milestone and the finish milestone, right? And so I'm big on colors as it relates to milestones, but nothing else. So I'd put a green milestone is always go, so start. And I'd put my red milestone up. And then what we would talk about is they have a week, right, to study the drawings and everything else and write their entire scope out and just place it somewhere between these 2 milestones on the pull board. And then when we sat down to actually do the pull plan, 95% of our tags were already written and built out. And then it was truly just everyone standing up at the board and touching and feeling and moving stuff around. So, depending on how intricate your project is, right? An OR, we might have 2 or 3 meetings just to make sure we have all our questions to ask before we really dive in to do the pull plan. If it was a school, it might just, if we're doing classrooms, right, it's probably 1 pre-meeting, but really it's setting the tone. And hey, you're going to come, you're going to understand your manpower, what you have available, what you have in your budget, right? What's in your scope. And then you also have to be able to truly make a decision for your company. Because if you can't do all that, then you're probably not the right person to be in the meeting anyway.
Yeah, I like the way you broke that down. That like in the preparation, it's all questions asked, and then when you get into the actual nailing the plan, it's all questions answered. It's a neat, nice distinction.
Yeah.
So, how was the learning curve? Here's another question. When you're first rolling out the big room concept in your early adoption, any key lessons learned with what to do or what not to do? I mean, there must have been things that didn't work out and you tried something else. You give a couple stories there.
We tried Rich's football and that didn't work out because then we just start throwing it at each other. We tried the football flag, that didn't work out. I'm trying to think. not coming prepared, like getting people, like if someone misses those pre-meetings and they show up and everyone else is ready to go, but that one key person isn't, that's always a train wreck, right? And I've done it in the past where I'm just like, well, we're going to have another pre-meeting because we got to get this individual up to speed, because there's no use in trying to plan out all this when 95% of everyone's ready, but there's one key individual that's not. You know, you get BS in is BS out. So, you know, having the right mindset to it.
So here's the question that's probably on a lot of people's minds. How do you deal with people who don't seem willing to follow your approach during meetings? Like, I guess you call them the hard rock or the problem. Like, how do you deal with them?
You know, there sometimes, unfortunately, you just manage them the best you can in the meeting, and then I'll give you an example. I had this plumber up in the mountains, and every time he was the yes guy, right? And the yes guy is the one that irritates me the most, because I knew the information he was giving me, he just couldn't do, but he didn't want to rock the boat. And so what we do is build the entire pool plan and everything else. We put his durations in there, and then we'd always have a second meeting with just him and be like, all right, just want to demonstrate what you just committed to. And we know your manpower availability and everything else. And we know you can't do it. So what's the real story? And what was really interesting is the rest of the team knew we were doing that and accepted it. And so we put this whole plan together, but they are okay with it, because once we had that second meeting with him and got him aligned, it meant everyone was now successful, and we weren't going to have this train wreck. And they really appreciated taking that time to go spend extra time with one. You're also going to run into the type that just don't like technology, and they'll tell you what they need, but they're not going to put it in there, or they wouldn't even handwrite it, right? There might be a little bit of a language barrier. We're going to have an interpreter in there, right? So I would bring someone extra in just to work with that one person to get their thoughts on the paper or on the board. And that way they were part of the plan, and they felt like they were part of the plan, and everything else they contributed. They just didn't feel comfortable touching the computers or handwriting stuff out.
Right. So here's an interesting question that's probably on everybody's mind. Did you encounter any objections around the cost of outfitting your big room with digital technology? And if so, how did you convince your team it was a worthwhile investment, say, to stickies and paper? Like, it's always a interesting one, right?
Well, absolutely, but it's an easy sell for me. And once I started explaining to our pre-con department, and the way I explained it is, here I am as a superintendent, right? And I'm going to do this old school. I'm going to do it all in spreadsheets. And so I have this live file spreadsheet for my weekly work plan, so in Excel. But I'm a superintendent, and I'm not going to spend hours on end at a computer. So guess who I'm bringing in to do this? I'm grabbing a PE. And now, right, to give you guys an example, the last project with these guys, I had 1,200 work activities a week is what we were tracking to for about 6 months straight, right? So now imagine taking a PE, that's almost a full-time PE, just working in a spreadsheet to get our weekly work plan, right? Because we were doing it, we would have our full plan, then we would have the subs hand us their plan for the week, right? Which we'd have to input into the weekly work plan, and then we would take out our P6 schedule, which was actually our pull plan, and we'd import the activities we were supposed to be doing. So there's all this work. So the way I explain it to my pre-con department is, all right, so I either have a P half-time or full-time that you think you're budgeting for something else on the project that's only working in last planner for me. And I said, so what ends up happening on my job is now we have to bring on another PE to cover what he or she is not doing for the project. And so show me where you have that originally in your budget, and then we can talk about the cost of putting up 3 boards and everything else. Because if I'm using a PE on a 2-year project and say they make $80,000 a year, well, there's $80,000 of their time that I'm using for planning, where I could have just bought the board, and now I, as the superintendent, am taking care of it all, and that PE is now back to doing PE work.
Right. So take that a step further and talk about the importance of data generated by that digital solution versus analog? Have you seen a shift in that regard?
Mm-hmm. Easier to get to. Right. The amount of data you guys actually collect on a digital one is about 10,000 more than what I actually got from, right? Because all I had was PPC and I knew what my variances were.
Right.
Right. The data that you guys are collecting, the exact date of when we turn that tag left or when we turn that tag right. So that's all really important. And just to get, so I had a subcontractor on my last project and it was on schedule and it was really rolling. We had 900 people on site. I had two different mechanical contractors, and one of them came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, we got to put a claim in. We've lost $600,000 because of inefficiencies." And so I pulled up the digital data, which was like, oh, here, I'm just going to hit this button and it's going to pull it all out there. And what I was able to show them is between their 4 different trades, they were running at 96% PPCs the entire project, from the plumbing, the mechanical piping to the ductwork. And the 6% that they weren't efficient on, it gave me all their detail in there. And 2% of the time it was because of someone else's planning. The rest of it was they had material delays, they had manpower issues, or they had illness, right? And so as soon as I showed them that data, which I got in a matter of, it was a big file, so it took like 30 minutes to download into Power BI. But within 30 minutes, I was able to show them that, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we had a calculation error. We actually made 200,000." So it was really fast. But the amount of data that we could track, and then, but that's also something that you've got to be very upfront with the folks. Here's all this data that we truly are collecting. Here, if you're really doing great, here's how you can utilize it to get more jobs. And if you're not doing so well, this is how we're going to use it to hold you accountable and make sure that you're keeping up with the rest of the project.
That's interesting. Can you map a successful big room experience to project on time, on budget? Is there a correlation there in your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's always stuff that happens on the project that's out of everyone's control, right? The owner makes a massive change, right? Is it the original? Is it the original contract, the original budget, right? But if you've got the right environment and everyone working together, I haven't seen it not be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way to end this. This webinar was about setting up for project success, and clearly, Shawn, you've mastered the concept of the big room, and really appreciate your time today. Some great insights, and I'm sure everybody is going to take something away. So, if there aren't any questions, I'll just leave it open for a second. You certainly can contact us. I'll just put up a couple of emails, either myself or Kelly, if you have any further questions, and we can get answers for you. And remember that you will have access to this video that you will be able to share. It will be on our Nyali YouTube channel. So again, thank you, Shawn.
Yep. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. And folks, thanks for joining us, and watch for our webinars in the upcoming months, as Kelly mentioned, in May and June. So I'm going to sign off, everyone, and take care, Shawn. Have a great day.